What are we talking to the people about today?
I think a really good subject for you especially, and I definitely can chime in on it, is teams.
Yeah, teams in
There's
real estate.
been a lot outside of the box thinking in terms of getting teams together.
And I think there's a lot of outside the box in today's world with teams. They've come so far and they're so different from what they were when I started in the business.
Well, I feel like there's so many different flavors, right? So I think as a team leader, you kind of have to really decide who you are. Kind of goes back to one of our very first episodes, who you are and who you're not. And then you build around that. I mean, the biggest lessons that I've learned in building teams is, number one, they got to be your people. So even if you meet people that you think should be on your team and they check off certain boxes, but you don't feel like they're your people, you're not going to win with them, right? So there's all these different nuances, I think, to building a team, and you've been through it a lot.
But I think we have to back up as to whether or not building a team versus building a supportive business.
Two different things.
Brian North and I have had lots of conversations about the solo agent building a business with infrastructure and support versus building a team. There's two different concepts.
For certain. And both of them contribute to creating a business.
Right.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to figure out that, having a team, and having the people that are relying on that team for their bread and butter was not for me. To run some of these massive teams that some of these guys do. They're phenomenal when it comes down to leadership and systems, and I'm such a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy. What do you see in some of the teams, like we've had Corinne and we've had Brian? What do you see are some of the characteristics of those leaders that are really leading great teams?
It's constant work at figuring out what they want their team to be and what the needs are, right? And how you're deciding to build, grow, create. And I think if you don't know really what you're trying to accomplish, and then we're working from the reverse, right? So then if you know what you're trying to accomplish, then it's easier to kind of decide what kind of people do I need, right? As opposed to, you said it earlier, some people just immediately start to go into some cookie cutter templates because that's what they see other people doing.
Right.
But I mean, whether you're on the lending side or real estate professional working in the title industry, I mean, all of these team building efforts come into play. I mean, they all come into play for what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So everything's about the goals. The goals are immovable. The ways in which you accomplish them should be flexible. And in that flexibility comes that piece where you get to play with, well, what does the person look like? What are the skills need to be? How many people? Like, all that comes into play, I think, when you're trying to figure out how to structure your team.
Yeah,
and who you need.
I think,
and then it still goes back down to finding the people that really match up with who you are.
Right.
It's huge. That's probably the biggest lesson I've learned.
Yeah, because
you can't lead people that don't want to be led by you.
True.
Yeah.
True. And you have to find people that are going to fit your culture because they're all different, right?
Yep.
So you look at like some of the luxury teams out there, I wouldn't be a good fit in their culture, right? Because it's a different type of culture.
Why? Aren't you fancy?
Well, it's not the fancy thing. It's just, right? There's just a different type.
Yeah.
Of personality in person when it comes down to that.
Let's talk about the mistakes, because that's why more now, is because of all the iterations that you've done before in creating teams. And here's the other thing that I think is really challenging as a team leader is you find people that you want to help, but there's two kinds of help. There's helping up, and then there's help and hope. And help and hope never works.
Right.
But when you find people that want help and you can help them up, that's a really great win. And I think sometimes it's very hard to distinguish the difference.
Well, and I think that the bigger issue there is the people that join teams, what, their motivation is. Are they there just to get what they need so that they can move on? And, I think
and that's okay.
Right. It's kind of like every employer, depending on what you want. And I think that's a strong characteristic in a leader, is that you do want people to move up, move out, and move on.
Yep.
Because you want them to grow. You don't ever want to put a lid on somebody, and you want people to grow.
I've always, it's a hard believe to always embrace. But everybody that is awesome for you will be awesome for someone else or themselves one day.
Sure.
They're all leaving us.
Kyle, you're not going anywhere.
Everybody's leaving at some point in time, and you want to see them flourish. You want to see them pursue dreams and goals, and then be able to say, man, I got to be part of that person's journey. Just like I'm part of someone else's, right? You're part of somebody else's. And that's kind of like the beauty of it all. I think as a leader or business owner, it's frustrating because recruitment never ends. There's no rest in recruitment. Correct. There's no resting in that at all. We're constantly looking for people. Like one of my favorite things is like we're never hiring, but we're always looking for good people.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So, and I think that the word team in and of itself has so many legs to it because there's the real estate team, there's the infrastructure operations, there's support, there's all these different facets to what that team looks like. And it takes time to draw out what is really needed first and what's needed second and how to find the right person.
You know, I heard this once. I think it was at a KW family reunion, and I forget the guy's name that spoke about it, but he talked about probably some of the biggest mistakes people start with when they decide to do a team. And I think that is one of the things maybe should be more talked about in the industry is that, you know, there's a lot of trial and error in team. And you first have to get your internal and your support dialed in before you can go add other people to it. Because if you can't support those people when they come in, they feel lost. And I have done that.
Yes.
Kyle's probably giggling over there right now.
He is. He's laughing his ass off.
Right. I have done that more than once where I feel like, oh, well, let's bring some buyer's agents on. Here's the mindset. The mindset is I can bring some other agents on and get a cut of what they're doing because I have leads. And I think that's the wrong mindset to have when you're trying to grow something in that capacity because it's not that simple. Because when you bring someone in, you have to have something to plug them into.
Yeah. I mean, anybody that you're bringing onto your team, it should be a multifaceted reason for their onboard, right? Like there should be a goal in mind for the purpose of their role. And then if it's only driven by leads, right, it's missing something. Like there's so many other facets to why somebody, and granted, don't get me wrong, we're all here to make money, but there's so many other reasons why. Like if it's kind of like when you talk to somebody and the only thing they want to talk about is splits, lead gen, you know what I mean? There should be a fuller conversation to that, you know? And, but it's true. I mean, I agree with you. I think that people go about growing their team with the wrong roles first.
Right.
Do you know? So
yeah. So if you go back to it, you know, the gentleman that spoke at that KW family reunion, he talked about, you know, you first try to go out and get buyer's agents, but you know what you really should be starting with is kind of like, okay, at what point in time do you need the help to run your business? So you're going to look at something which in our business it's a TC, a transaction coordinator, or an executive assistant, depending on how you want to run that role, so that you have somebody to help you with paperwork and those types of things, and they can grow with you. And then you kind of look at, once that role is fulfilled, you know, one of the things that's truly missing in a lot of businesses, and I know that I've struggled with this, is the customer service aspect, right? Somebody to keep in touch with your clients, your sphere, keep things moving so that part of your business, you know, there's so much focus on how do we lead gen more, when the reality is you have all the lead gen you could use inside your sphere if you market it and advertise and stay in touch with those relationships and cultivate them.
Totally. And it's interesting, right? Because the whole spectrum of being an agent could be the solopreneur who's just starting, or somebody who's got a pretty built out business like you do. And I mean, all those pieces play such an important role, whether you're brand new or established, in figuring out the parts of the business that you need first. But I also think it also correlates into your strengths. So knowing what you're good at and what you like doing in the business can actually also really highly influence the characters that you need to play. Like I would recommend, if you're a solo agent, where you work now, like whether there's resources or not. Like a lot of companies offer transaction coordinators, a lot of companies offer marketing support. Like really start to be aware of how you interact with those entities and what you need from them and how often you use them and how you communicate with them and how the smoothness of the interaction goes, because that's telling you everything you need to know about how you're going to eventually grow your business too. And I do think that, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Strength Finders, but Strength Finders is awesome because it's like a $20 test by Gallup, and it tells you your top 5 strengths, right? So, and then it categorizes them into execution, relationships, strategy. So if you're any kind of business owner, imagine taking that, learning that your first 5 strengths are all in creating relationships. Clearly, you're not going to be good at admin,
Right.
right? So those are like indicators of those areas that you could be growing for yourself, whether you think you need a buyer's agent or otherwise. Like knowing that you're terrible at administration, right, or operations, maybe that should be, you know, a thought about what you're probably going to need first or most throughout your business.
And I think
Sorry, I just totally went off on a tangent.
no, not at all. Because I think that that's great when you find your strengths in the business. You know, it's taken me a long time to figure out what mine are.
We're going to do it. You're going to do Strength Finders.
Okay.
I'm dying to see what yours are. There's 34 strengths, and it'll tell you your top 5.
It'll probably tell me I'm a spaz, comedian, a few other things.
I mean, Strength Finders is really cool. For $20, it's really cool.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, so I think the other thing that is really important is if you're a solo agent and you're thinking about the team, I think you know, Steve. It's you've got to start with the end in mind, which is what do you see your business? And even though you're going down that road, don't be afraid to pivot and do not watch what everybody else is doing in the industry, because that is like that is the instant
Agreed.
death.
You have to ask questions. If you just watch and then try to replicate, you're gonna fail. And there's nothing wrong with failure. Fail is first attempt in learning. But if you actually see something and then start asking questions and having conversations and like looking under the hood a little bit, you'll have a little bit more foresight as to whether or not that's something that you really want, right? So I agree. Like, make sure that you know really what you want, not just replicating what other people are doing. I think you should share some of the iterations that you've been through, because yours has been, I mean, you've been in business for a really long time, and you've had I mean, for me, working with you the last few years, I feel like I've seen you have the strongest, most solid group of people working with you that I've kind of witnessed. And so, and I know it's gone through its cycles for you.
Oh, it's been 20 years, 20 years of cycles. Because I didn't really know where exactly I wanted to be. And I spent too much time looking at what other people were doing and trying to figure out how to do it their way, which didn't work for me. So I ended up going back to my old ways. And it just started to evolve from the standpoint of, okay, how do I want this to look? I know that I am still, even though I'm a visionary, I'm still the relationship person. I love to be with people. I love to be out in the field. I love to look at the houses and do those things. You know, obviously some of that stuff gets to a point to where you can only do so much. But I realized early on that I'm never going to be one of these team leaders that wants to remove themselves from the business, from being out in the field.
Right.
And one of the reasons that
you did try to do that before.
I did, and it kind of backfired me in a couple of different ways. You know, with a couple of clients, you know, they were hard lessons to learn. But I also realized that some people get to that point where, like, I want to be removed. And I understand that when you are trying to run a business and do all those things, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to, like, remove themselves.
You have to hire yourself out.
Right.
But don't hire yourself out of the positions that you're the money on.
Correct. So when I find my strengths now, my strength is in being able to sit down with a client and figure out which direction they go. It's something that I'm still trying to teach, and I think it takes years to learn how how it works, like how my mind operates, like the questions. You know, I'll go to this conversation yesterday. I think Kyle has learned a ton from the conversations and how not everything is a sale. So I talked to a young kid yesterday. He's 26. Now, being the fact that I'm an investor and I'll buy just about anything, but I'm also, I know, also wanting to make sure that I live to my fullest passion, which is helping people build wealth through real estate. So when I talked to this kid yesterday, he's like, he has this opinion from what he's gotten from a bunch of other people about what the market's doing, where it's going. So I had a 30-minute conversation on the house that he owns and how to refinance it, keep it, buy the next house, keep that one as a rental, and here's all the steps that we're going to do to it. But the conversation started out like, hey, I don't think I want to do any work to this. I just want to sell it and get a quick buck and move on. But you really have to understand where people are going in order to lead them. Now, he didn't have any real motivation. It was just something that he thought was a good idea. So it's hard for me to continue to try to pass that conversation on without people just learning. And I think that's, if you were to ask Kyle, I think that's what a lot of his time spent, even though he's, here in studio and doing some video stuff for me, but the conversations that he's heard over the last couple of years.
That's the learning piece.
That's the learning piece. And that's the way I learned from my dad.
Right.
I think you learn from experience. And I think that when agents go to be part of a team, there needs to be a different mindset that I'm here to be educated and to learn the business through experience rather than learn what I can to take with me and move on to the next thing. And it's not all about money.
Agreed. Agree. I very much agree on that third point. It's not all about money. We all need to make money. We're all here to make a living.
Sure.
But I think, to your point, for you recognizing that that's how you learn best and that's how you teach best, then you find people that also collectively are in that same type of mindset. Whereas in other environments, people teach differently and people learn differently, right? So I think that's what's so cool for you in building your teams is really finally getting to that piece of recognizing that you've always known that. Like, you've always known that that's how you like to learn and that's how you teach best. And then finding people that also match up with that, right?
Right.
So, but I think that's a really huge... I think that's really huge as a leader to be able to realize, okay, this is the piece, and to be able to describe it and share it, and then find people that you can share that with them. Like, you can actually verbally tell them, like, this is how we roll, right?
Right.
And a lot of people can't do that, right?
Well, I think people see that as a weakness. They think that they're weak if they have to admit something or whatnot. I mean, look at the podcast, right? I tried to do this a couple of years ago. It didn't work for me. It didn't flow well for me by myself. I couldn't sit in front of a camera and just like have a 45-minute conversation with a freaking camera on a topic. It wasn't best. So you're here, but I realized that was a weakness, and it's not necessarily a weakness. It wasn't a strength. So I needed to find somebody else to complement and have the conversation, which, is why you're here, because you complement the situation. You help me bring things out. And I realize I need to do that. But I think...
And I make you laugh, too.
You do make me laugh. I'm going to start calling you Bubbles.
Did you just say Bubbles?
Bubbles. So, I think it's important, if you're going to be in leadership and grow a team, that you figure out the things that, where your strengths are, and you hire to the things that you're not good at. And again, I don't want to call them weaknesses. They're just things that either you're not passionate about, right? I can't run the camera and do what Kyle does.
I would just call it challenges, right? There's strengths and challenges. Like, I'm with you. I've never been a big fan of the word weakness. Like, I just feel like, okay, those are just areas for opportunity if they matter.
Right.
So, like, in a spectrum of 34 strengths, the ones that are at the bottom, do I think of them as my weaknesses, or do I just think of them as areas that I have the opportunity to make better if I wanted to? Right. But, I mean, I think the other thing, too, is leadership. A lot of people have that phrase, like, it's lonely at the top, so to speak. It doesn't have to be, right? Because communication is key, the ability to share, the ability to be vulnerable. There's all these other elements of leadership outside of here's how to succeed, right? Here's the formula, or come listen, or watch and learn. Like there's still this other element that people want to feel and see and witness, that vulnerability, that ability to share, the communication. And I think that that's also a key piece to developing a great team is that openness. And I think that that has especially evolved a lot in the last decade, because when I first got into sales, which was more than a decade ago, it was very different environment with the boss, right? Your team leader, like the person who was responsible for, you know, me being there. That relationship has changed dramatically. So in a good way, right? In a very good way. But there is an element of today that I think happens more than I saw before, is this element of if somebody is on your team and they're not doing well, it's your fault, right? Whereas it's not. It is and it isn't, because somebody either needs to perform or isn't performing, and then you have to evaluate, have I been a good leader? So somebody can succeed, you know, they need to succeed, but there's a different element today of what's expected, I think, from a leader. I hope that made sense.
Well, yes, it does make sense, because, you know, I think when you started talking, I kind of think back to some of the agents that have worked for me in the past, and I've gotten frustrated because I see all that can be done, and here's all the tools. And if you can't get out of your own way and do the things that we talked about, then your success is determined by your ability to participate.
Yes. I can't care more about your success than you do. I can lay out all the resources and tools, right? But you also have to, but it goes hand in hand. You have to be a great leader too. You have to make sure that you have a genuine desire to see that person succeed. But, you know, I've seen a lot of teams where you have somebody who says all the right things, but just doesn't do the work, right? And so it can be kind of this fake out of sorts. But you're right. I mean, if you have all the resources and tools and people aren't applying themselves, it's a challenge.
Agreed.
It's a total challenge.
So here's kind of the evolution of, you know, where I'm at now. And, you know, it's taken me 20 years to get here to figure it out. So when I started with my parents, right? My dad was my greatest mentor. Same thing with my mom. You know, my dad showed me the back end of the creativity side. My mom was really instrumental in showing me, you know, how to work with clients and show houses and what it looked like. I mean, I still remember the first house I showed with my mom. And,
that's funny. That's awesome.
You know, I learned by, you know, going out, showing houses, and then sitting down with my dad and writing the contract. And I did that for years. And it was never in me to like, okay, well, now I know this and now I'm out, because there was so much more to learn. And that's how I felt. And I think some agents get in and they do a couple of transactions like, I got this. I mean, I'm dealing with an agent right now that's texting me going, this agent flipped this house and there's a repair that's needed and they won't do it, and I'm trying to get creative. How do I fix this? Right? They're solo. They don't know how to fix it because they haven't had the experience on how to fix it. And so, you know, I think that the 7 years that I was with my parents, I learned so many different facets of the business and how to do things. And that grew me, right? There was a lot of family issues that kept us from staying together, you know, which we've gone in the last couple of or podcasts in the past. But my point being is that you can definitely grow inside a team and stay there, I mean, for a very long time, some people for life, because there's always room to grow. And so where I'm at now is looking at people's strengths when they come in, and sometimes the thing that they wanted most is not always the thing they're going to end up with, because they don't see it.
For sure.
They don't see it all at the beginning. So,
well, because we all change, right? You go into something with a perception of what you think you want until you actually get into it and you realize, oh my gosh. I mean, one of my favorite books of all time is Alchemist, and it's about this person trying to get to an end point. But the reality was the whole journey was the gift, right? So it's the same thing when you kind of are coming into something is like, okay, here's what I think I want. But you get to learn all these other things along the way that help you kind of mold and modify what you thought you wanted.
Right.
I mean, I feel like that happens for everybody. I think that it's very few people who really are like, from the time they were a child to when they actually pursued and executed on something they thought they wanted to do, right? I mean, but no, I completely agree with you on that. I mean, the exposure creates this whole element for them to decide even other roads to go down.
Yep. So, when I look at how we developed, Erica started out as, wanting to be a buyer's agent, and then realized she did not like the whole like calling and figuring things out and this, that, and the other. And she decided like, hey, we had some change in staff, and she decided I want to do the TC part. So she started doing that, but then she quickly became like my right arm in everything that we do. And I remember a couple of years coming back and putting her on corporation documents, and she signs everything for me. I mean, listing paperwork, contracts, things that we buy. So she manages all of that.
But see, that's an amazing element of running a team, is seeing that somebody isn't, flourishing in a role that they thought that they wanted, and whether it's from the team member or from the leader that recognizes that and then realizes, okay, but this is still a great asset for our team. What role can I put you in that makes you happy, helps you excel, that you enjoy doing, and then at the same time, it fulfills something that you need too. And I think that's huge. A lot of teams miss out on that.
What was really important in her role was, hey, I want to be able to work, but I also want to still be able to be a mom. So she was able to come into the office after she dropped her kids off, leave to go pick them up, and, do some things at home and on the weekends, but she didn't have to be glued to, I've got to go show houses, I've got, so she has that flexibility, which is one of the things that she absolutely loves. She's tied to her desk. She loves doing the paperwork and the details and all that other stuff, and she's just grown exponentially, and she's like my right arm in the business. And then you look at, Tammy started doing some customer service for me, and 7 years ago, our business has pivoted from the standpoint of, doing traditional real estate and into the investment side. And now Tammy's our CFO, but when I hired her, I didn't even realize, again, she wanted to be a mom. She wanted flexible hours. She had 2 little kids, and she grew into the CFO of the company, and now she manages everything when it comes down to finances across 4 or 5 different companies, plus our rental portfolio, and plus our investor operations. So you've got to look at people and give them the opportunity to grow into what they want, because their perception is completely different. I'm going to make Kyle turn his mic on here. I think Kyle, coming from another team, I think his perception when he got into the business was completely different then and what it is now. Kyle, what was like, you started when you entered this business a couple of years ago, what was your initial perception, and what's kind of changed over that time?
Coming in, I was very image-based and image-driven on what I saw agents doing, because obviously I didn't have any experience in the industry, so it's just what I could see successful agents doing and emulating what they look like, but I didn't realize I didn't have the knowledge really to back the scenarios up. So since being in here, I can say in the last year and a half, I find myself in rooms that I'm much more comfortable being in and having the conversations, just because I've spent a year and a half next to you, listening to you, with all of our clients.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, seriously, right? There's so much to be said for growth through just getting to be in the right rooms.
Right. But then you also look at the growth, and I saw something in Kyle 6 months ago that I was like, I wonder what this looks like, because there was a passion there. And Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I saw in Kyle that he was lacking, being in real estate is a sales and a person driven, but sometimes you want to have some creativity. And Kyle came from building some ridiculous custom trucks and different things, and there was a creativity piece in him, and started realizing that in the video aspect, and 6 months ago, I gave him a camera, and
That's so cool.
Gone crazy with it.
He's gone crazy with it.
Look at the studio.
From the vlogs. I mean, he's creating stuff that I wish I could create, but I just don't have the patience for it, number one. But then creating the studio and everything else. But it's seeing things in people and giving them the opportunity. And sometimes we have to help, as a leader, help shape and see what people don't see in themselves.
For sure. I mean, it's a fine line, right? Because that's the biggest challenge, I think. That's why you want to be in leadership, is because you see more for others than they see for themselves. And sometimes that can be misinterpreted by the person you're trying to help.
Right.
Right. But it is true. I think that it's important to get to help people see and believe what they're capable of.
Right. And my goal for, my employees and my team. So, my team is more of a solo agent. It relies around me. I'm the face of the business. I still interact with a lot of the clients, and everybody here is to support the vision that I have. And they know that, but the other side of it is that we're all doing real estate together. Mm-hmm. We truly work as a collective group. If I can't get to something, Erica will take on a client, Kyle will take on a client, Eden will. Even though Kyle and Eden, Erica all have different full-time roles, they're all jumping in on the real estate side,
right,
to help when I need. And then they're all supporting me in the background with the vision that I have. But the other big goal for me is that all of my employees here and my team, I actually call them all partners. I really don't. I hate referring to people as employees. It drives me nuts. I refer to all my partners, and I want them all to have the mindset and the knowledge and the opportunity to invest in real estate as well. I'm watching Tammy buy her first investment property, and Erica's bought a couple, and Ben is working on it. Kyle's working on his first one, but the conversation has been much different than just buying his first home. It's his first investment property, because there's a path to long-term wealth through this business, and I don't want any of my partners or my employees,
I always call them associates,
to not have but then they become asses. People start shortening it.
No. Like, I can tell you're like, what do I call them?
So I want them to have the same opportunity that has afforded me a massive amount of wealth in what I've built. And I want them to have the same opportunity and mindset, so that they're trained to see opportunity, as we go through this business, an opportunity for them to create wealth and serve clients and those types of things. And my point to all that is, there's a value you can't equate. If you're looking for commission splits and this, that, and the other, there's a value you can't equate on future and mindset. And so when I look at, everybody's got an income right now, but what is their future going to be with their investments, with the opportunity here, all those different things.
Right.
And that's what I think is important when it comes down to building that.
Yeah. I mean, and every team is going to be different. Every team is going to have a different why. And so I think that's another important characteristic of, okay, you want to build a team, or whatever, whether it's the infrastructure, the ad, whatever that is, right? But I mean, what is your why? And so you have a very clearly defined one for your team, which is really cool. So I think when you have conversations with people about coming to work with you, it's already kind of established. There's a rapport established with some things in common that actually kind of just creates more and more of like this, yes, you're great. Come over, come hang out with us, right? So that's awesome.
I also know when I've had agents reach out like, hey, I'm looking for a team. Well, what's your experience look like? And I realized that, Kyle will tell you, because Kyle was kind of a guinea pig in this, but it's, I am not a great person to start with if you are just trying to learn the business, because I don't have the time or the bandwidth or the systems in place to help a new agent go from point A to point B, because things are moving at light speed here.
Right.
So, when I tell
it's
agents,
definitely
I'm like,
not your
hey,
wheelhouse.
it's not my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a traditional wanting to learn how to work with buyers and sellers, it's not my wheelhouse.
No.
I will confuse the shit out of you, because what I do is completely different and completely outside the box always.
Yeah.
But I do refer them to multiple different teams that I know have great training platforms. Yeah. They've got great trainers, and that's where they need to start to get their feet wet. And those are people that I know will help them grow in the business.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that, obviously, I'm such a big advocate of continuing to work with agents, inside and outside my brokerage, and how do we work together, and how do we make a win-win? And don't hesitate me when shit is weird. That's when you call me.
Right.
Like, that's where I'm really good. But if you're gonna ask me like, hey, how do I write this contract? Like, I'm like, out.
Well, I think what's cool is this, like if you're going to run a team, know what your vision is, know what your why is, right? Like understand what your team culture is, and then start to figure out what you need to accomplish, how to reverse engineer that into the kind of people that you want to work with. And then even if people check off the boxes for the characteristics that you're looking for, are they a fit for the why?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think that's huge. And then if you're on the other end of it where you're looking to join something, like what are your strengths? Like how aware are you of how you conduct yourself now? Like, how are you interacting with all the players that help you get a transaction accomplished anyway? Whether it's, the resources from your brokerage or if they're people that you already have, like how good are you at being aware of the way you already work?
Right.
Because a lot of us need to work on that, like really understanding the awareness of how we already operate so that when you go to talk to somebody about being a member of their team, you have a better idea of who you are to be an asset to them and them be an asset to you, right? So I think that there's a lot to be said for how you've put your team together.
And I think I'm going to chime in on that one real quick. I think since I've been on the team and I've been here from the beginning and I was pretty new when I started, a big asset as well that you have is Erica. She helped me out a ton. So even though that's not an area that you're good at, she really knows the contract, knows how to write that stuff. So I've learned a ton from her. And then when it got to the crazy stuff, I learned an insane amount from you. So then when it comes to like a traditional contract or traditional deal, it feels super simple because I'm used to seeing crazy.
Because you have the support, and it goes back to there's no way I could have given Kyle and Eden the time that they needed on, questions that, I can answer in my sleep because, again, I'm moving at the speed of light. But they always know that Erica is there to support them.
That's the best way to be a leader and to create a team is that the people on your team know who they can get help from. If you're the only vault,
right, then
you're going to be in trouble. If you are the vault of all things needed on your team, you're in so much trouble.
Yeah, because you have to have those abilities. Like, yes, Kyle and Eden know, like, if it's outside the box and I need something different, that's when I need to talk to Steve. If it's a normal contract and how are we doing this and what about this, where do we go with it? And that's where Erica comes in. So Erica's able to support that. And it kind of goes back to what I said is that don't build a team until you have support for the people you're plugging into. Because if you don't have the support, you become the only piece of support to that person.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm just cracking up because you have the best spectrum. Because you operate a lot of transactions out of just feel and gut and just knowledge and experience, where then you've got like an Erica who she just knows the contract. She knows people too. She does a great job with like her, bedside manner, right? With like handling the customers and clients. So you just have a good representation for the whole spectrum of the types of contracts that come your way.
So you said something that was like critical for somebody in Erica's position. I think it is really hard if you hire somebody to be a TC and they're just doing background work and you're worried about their bedside manner or their ability to talk to a consumer, you're going to be in trouble.
Yep.
And I 100%. Did that for a while. Like I had somebody that was so strong in the paperwork side.
Terrible with people.
But so nervous for them to be on the phone. And then when Erica stepped into the position, I'm like, oh my God, this girl thinks and talks just like I do. Like she can put some humor in. She can say things that need to be said without being offensive. And I was like, wow, this is like going to buy me all kinds of time because now I don't have to be the only person talking, to that person. So, we talked earlier about removing yourself from certain things, right? So my only, position right now is to be creative, put the ink on the deal, if we're buying something or acquiring something, and guide the client to where we're going, give them the steps. After that, Erica steps in and she knows what to do with it from there once she knows what all the variables are and I filled in all the blanks. And now she can take it from there, whether we're negotiating, inspection reports or we're closing on a deal or all those things. I don't have to do anything. When I buy a house and that contract is signed, Erica takes it all the way to closing from getting wires from investors and all those other things. And so it's taken us a while, but you got to find that person that can emulate your personality.
Totally. How have you gone about getting moving people off the team?
Oh, not very well.
I mean, like, how do you go? Because I think it's important. I think it's so great to talk about how you look and how you structure and how you, well, I shouldn't say look, meaning looks, but look for people. But I think the other piece is when you recognize that somebody's not the right fit for your team. And
I can tell you where I failed at it is not recognizing it early on, like having some steps in place.
hire slow, fire fast.
Not having certain steps and milestones in place within the first 30, 60, 90 days to know if this person is going to survive. And I think that, where I've come with some of the agents, Nicole's the most recent addition to the team, and she had some very hard steps that she had to pass through to stay here. And she accomplished those. And she's very driven and, she's doing very well. She was also willing to take on something that most agents weren't willing to at the beginning. And it was a lower split and some learning, and she's done very well.
That's awesome.
So, but when I first talked to her, I was like, look, 30, 60, 90 days we're reviewing, and if you can't cut this at 90 days, you're out. So I want to make sure that we're really clear on this expectation up front.
Yep.
So that when 90 days comes up, you're not surprised by this.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important for any team to. I spent too much time thinking that people are going to do better.
Oh gosh.
And I had a couple of agents that just, and they weren't good culture either.
Right.
They really tanked on some culture, and I realized that, okay, this personality type is not good for my culture and my business. And, they left on their own, which was fine. But I think it's really important to figure that out very early.
I mean, on my teams, whenever I brought anybody new on, we had 2 agreements. One was, these are our rules of engagement. So this is what we do as a sales team. These are our commitments. And then we had goal setting. And then within the goals, anytime, and those goals were all set in milestones as well. So whenever we got together, it was never me telling them they were not doing good enough. It was like, hey, is it still important to you?
Right.
Because you're the one that told me that this is what you needed, what you wanted, right? And so it changes the conversation a little bit, and it gives them ownership, right? But I agree with you. Like, you have to not only do such a great, do the work to bring on the right people, but also, like you with your investments, you have to have an exit strategy.
Right.
And you have to have something for them to be able to take care of on their own, just as much as they're being coached and mentored, right?
Sure. And I think, when we talk about agents exiting, every agent that's exited has always been because of money.
Well, that's what you think.
Well, it's pretty much known fact. I mean, just with that, I mean, for the most part. Okay, so agreed. Maybe I didn't know all of it. I do wish that I would have done some exit interviews or had somebody do some exit interviews, but most of it had to do with money, or I've learned enough and I can make more money doing this on my own. And they didn't see the value of support, office, like all the different abilities. I mean,
which is okay. They're not the right people, right? So it's
if
like,
you don't
cool.
see the value, it's okay. But I think so 2 things. I think leadership needs to see it sooner, faster. And I think agents, if you're not feeling the vibe or you're not feeling, comfortable where you're at, then you need to have that conversation and make the exit in a good way, so that you don't burn a bridge, because, this business is very small.
You're remembered more for how you leave than how you came in.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's tie this up and put a bow on it for people. So if you were going to, what are like the top 5 things, an agent should be asking if they're going to go to a team? Like what does it look like for a newer agent that you've seen? Because I know that you get a lot of new agents that come to you and they're like, hey, I'm looking for this. I think a new agent should have just as much of an interview process as the team lead should have interview process.
Oh, for sure. When people ask me about teams, I ask them a lot of questions about what's important to them, right? Because every single team that I work with, they all have a different vibe. They all have a different tribe. They all have a different culture. And it's a little bit of matchmaking, but it's also really about asking that person, is that really what you want? Like, are you ready to be, because to be on a team is a commitment and there's an expectation.
Right.
So a lot of people got their license to
Thinking
not
they were
have a
gonna do the
boss.
entrepreneur thing,
Yes.
right?
They don't want to have a boss. But if you're going to be a member of a team and you want to get all these leads, what are you really willing to do? Because
Right.
it's like having
A job.
yeah. Right? So those are just important questions. I think if you're an agent looking to be on a team, you need to ask yourself a few questions, like, what are your strengths? What are the things you're good at? What do you really want to get out of this? What's your longevity? Like, do you want to be on a team to learn and then move on? Because there's a lot of different places that you can hang your hat to get the education that you need with team leaders that to some degree expect a turnstile because of the style of their business, right? But then there are some teams that don't. So it's really about understanding kind of what they want. Do you want independence within a team? Do you need the social piece? Like, there's a lot of questions that people should ask about being on a team for sure. So top 5, I mean, I don't know how to I think for the leadership side, it's easier to say, here are the top 5 things that you should consider.
Let's do the leadership side. I mean, what do you...
I think on the leadership side, they need to have a well-defined why. They need to have a well-defined goal. They need to understand the role that they're looking for that person to take, and they need to be accepting as to what the expectation is for the longevity.
I think, one of the things I learned from Lizzie Hofer was, your core values, your 5 or 6 core values that you hire and fire based on these things. And, she said the most profound thing to me, which I remember using it the first time on Nicole. And I absolutely love this terminology. And I think that it's the best, not terminology, analogy. This Valentine group is like a child, right? So I've grown it, I've fed it, I've done all these things to it. If I catch you abusing my child, not feeding it, not treating it right, or abusing it, I will fire you, right? Like, that's a fireable offense when it comes down to it. And people need to realize, like,
this is your baby.
This is my baby, and it's taken me a long time to build this. Building a team, building a business takes a long time, and it doesn't happen overnight. So for those of you that, I'll kind of end on this. For those of you that think, building a business, running a team, all those things look very appealing. They are appealing. There's a lot of reward in it, but there's also a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of late nights, a lot of failures, a lot of tears shed, a lot of relationships that get damaged along the way because you're not quite ready for it.
Sounds so fun.
I know, it sounds so fun, right?
Right.
But it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you need to be prepared for that work, but I also think you need to be prepared to realize as you get into it that sometimes you're going to have to pivot, and maybe I need to do this differently.
Right.
Maybe I want to run this differently than what I've seen other people do. So learn and take away the things that you like about certain things and do things the way, that work best for you in creating that culture and that team.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point, like the work involved, stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish, like what that vision looks like. Stay focused on your vision, and then all the heartache and good times will still be part of that journey, as opposed to being so focused in that. And I see that happen for people. They get lost in the day-to-day friction, right? There's no comfort in growth. There just isn't. And if you stay focused on that vision and that why, you can get through all of those pieces because you're driving towards something.
Yep.
So
fantastic. Hey guys, thanks for listening, watching. Keep in mind, we'd love to have some 5-star reviews from you. And follow Bernie on Instagram at
Burns Picks.
Burns Picks. And I'm at Steve D. Valentine. And lots of value on the investment side, the real estate side there. And we appreciate you guys. Until next time.
Thank you.